Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading for, I can't even pretend to say Friday Reads at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and say my AM reading for High Holidays 5782, because that's where we are still right now. Since this is my first AM reading of the month, I will point you to my August newsletter. It's a literary newsletter I do every month on my blog, where I highlight the literary news that has caught my fancy. I have a book pick, I have a book meme. I also have snippets of all of the Goodreads reviews of the books I had read that month, so it's all listed down below. I'm also continuing with this tradition where I am slowly reading through Dorothy Parker's short story collection, one story per this AM reading video basically, so moving slow but having a lot of fun doing this. The story I'm talking about today is called A Telephone Call, and it was published in 1928. And it is basically the running inner monologue, I'm pretty sure, of a woman who is desperately waiting for a man to call, who promised to call her at 5 and it's 2 hours later. And the whole 4 or 5 pages is her inner monologue of, oh God, why isn't he calling? Maybe I'll, try counting from, down from 5s and then he'll call. Or, oh please God, won't he call? Why won't he call? And then she gets mad at electronics that are, reminding her of, all the time that's passing that he wouldn't have called or he should have called. And, she just, begs and pleads of God, and she gets angry at him, and then, gets into the whole mindset of, well, really, I need to calm down. Nobody likes, a neurotic, crazy, obsessive woman, that sort of thing. So, I thought it was very clever and probably accurate to a lot of, I'm certainly speaking from personal experience, accurate to some of the anxieties that I allow myself to get into, this ridiculousness when I'm, super obsessed with, a certain telephone call or whatever it might be. Although at the same time, I don't know, there's just all the gender stereotype stuff still, about, this codependency really, and how should we just view it as the woman's fault for being neurotic, or is there something telling her basically that, your life has no meaning unless, a man pays you attention? So, I don't know, I guess I'm feeling a little defensive lately because Dorothy Parker does so many short dashed off stories that are critical of women. So after a while, you start to identify with the underdog, I guess, but even I have to say this was very clever and amusing. So September is known in some circles as Science Fiction Month or Sci-Fi Month or SFF Month, which is where I'm going with this because I'm starting the month and I've read one fantasy book and one science fiction book. The first book I finished this month is the fantasy book, The Light of the Midnight Stars by Rena Rossner, which was one of my anticipated reads of the year. And this is Rossner's second published book and the second one I've read. It takes place in 13th century Hungary and Wallachia, following a Jewish family, and it is sort of a portal fantasy, as it were. I mean, I guess there's not really a portal, but basically what I'm saying is, I guess urban fantasy or village fantasy is more accurate because almost everything is the same as real life except for some fantastical elements. The biggest one being the family we're following. They're called Solomoners, which means they descended from King Solomon, and as such they have magical powers, because why not? Another big component of the story is the Black Mist, which is this foreboding sort of vaporous sickness that follows people around and makes life horrible for everyone. And Rossner kind of put it in there as sort of a multi-layered thing. And I think what it worked best as is a metaphor for anti-Semitism, and then when she was trying to do other stuff with it, it kind of lost its way a little. And I feel like that's sort of the problem with this book. I thought I liked this book better than I liked her first book, Sisters of the Winter Wood, but I think I liked it less well, actually. And I think a lot of it has to do with her biting off more than she can chew. If you go to the author's note in the back, which is several pages long, she'll go into deep detail about Hasidic tales and fairy tales and poetry and all sorts of things that inspired this book. But I feel like she never got everything in there quite cohesively enough. So we are following 3 sisters with their 3 separate powers. The oldest one is Hannah, and she's a healer and can make things grow from the earth. And one of her major deals is that she and her mother are so well renowned for this that the Gentiles know about it. So, in fact, somebody who's high up in the nobility in Hungary at the time, one of their mother is sick, and the son goes to ask for Hannah to help. And while Hannah is at their house for months on end taking care of this woman, Hannah and the son Jacob fall in love. That leads to basically disastrous consequences for the Jews, because Jacob decides, I love this woman well enough that I'm going to leave my faith behind. And the Christians are like, oh, hell no. So, And then the second daughter is Sarah, and she's very fiery and impatient, and I guess that goes with part of her nature, which is that she can control fire. And she also finds love with her father's a rabbi, and she finds love with one of his basically disciples. And they kind of end tragically as well, because there's a pogrom that starts. That forces the people of this town out of the Jews of this town out of the town, and Sarah and her family are able to escape, but they never find her betrothed again. And then finally the youngest daughter is Levana. She's sort of the most esoteric and the most sort of removed, and she is obsessed with stars, and really her power comes in a lot later, and really ties into the Romanian folktale Boys with Golden Stars, which is about two boys born with stars on their foreheads, and Rossner extrapolates this into a Jewish-themed story with Levana. And as this book goes on, in fact, and Levana, has dealings with starmen and that sort of thing, her narration turns from prose into poetry. So that's another little kink of hers. So yeah, I think there's a lot of intriguing elements in this, and I was very impressed, certainly from a Jewish standpoint, of how much religious history and mythology and so forth that Rossner was able to put in this. And there's a big glossary in the back as well for that sort of stuff, and also the Romanian and Hungarian and that sort of stuff that gets into the book. I think my favorite part really is Sarah, and I guess I'll backtrack to say part 2 of this basically is the Salamander family, this particular Salamander family, trying to live in hiding in Wallachia, which technically is known at the time for being tolerant of all religions, but you never know how much that really is true, so they're kind of pretending to be Christian. And for a little while I thought Rossner was going with the conceit that they actually forgot their identities in the woods, but then I think it became more realist, and it was really, they were just hiding it. And anyway, all the girls get new names, and this is when Sarah meets a young man named Theodore, who is another sort of high-up person in Wallachia, and he has actually his own sort of hidden past, and I think that goes into some interesting commentary. I mean, I can say the commentary, but I feel like if I get too specific, I'll spoil things. But anyway, it goes into commentary about feminism, I think, is a big one, about who's allowed to sort of exist in the culture the way they want to, and who isn't, when people don't want to stay in their particular gendered roles. And that's something that Sarah and Theodore go into together, and I feel like it's no surprise that then the two of them get into some sort of shape-shifting, because that kind of also goes into the idea of, queerness, and queerness is definitely a part of their storyline, and I thought the way it worked out was really good and really touching, and was a very deep relationship, although it wasn't necessarily a romantic relationship, but there were hints. And I mean, this is one of the things I think some people wouldn't like so much about it, but now I'm just starting to ramble. For me, this was some of the strongest parts of the story, really, but otherwise I just feel like there was just a little too much going on, and I never could really identify much with the characters other than that, because the plot was just so breakneck, and I felt like I never really could grasp onto it as much as I hoped to. So it was good, but not as good as I thought, I guess is where I'm going with it. I mean, I'm still glad I read it. I love reading Jewish fantasies, and I'll still be talking about it later in the month, comparing it to a similar Jewish fantasy that I will be reading soon. So stay tuned. The next book I read was my science fiction book, The Telling by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is also my at the top of my Goodreads TBR, or used to be, that I put it on in 2016, but now it's finally off because I've read it, so I'm excited about that too. I have to admit that, I had a lot of hype riding on this book because this is my first Ursula K. Le Guin, and anyone in the speculative fiction world, and other reading worlds as well, knows how famous she is and how much of a sort of mother of the genre and of writing she really has become. So of course I decided to start with book 8 in her Hainish cycle. Not book 1, book 8. Technically speaking, they are all standalones, and I certainly could follow along with this one well enough on its own, although I was aware throughout this that there's a lot of backstory that I would have known about if I'd started with another book. Anyway, this is a book that takes place on the planet Akka, which is kind of like a mirror image of a dystopian Earth that Le Guin is dealing with. In dystopian Earth, it's kind of like The Handmaid's Tale writ large, where there's a neo-Christian group, and they're oppressing everyone else and suppressing knowledge. And then on Akka, there's this atheist corporate group that's suppressing their own history. And a lot of that history does have to do with religion and spirituality and culture. Our main character is an earther called Sully, who is there to observe the Akan culture, but she's stuck in the main city and is just sort of on a propaganda loop and, bored out of her mind because there's nothing really to observe about culture in a place that's really, denying its own culture. And she's able to get an assignment to a wilderness town that's, on the outskirts and is in bad faith with the government because there's some radicals there that still continue to be connected to their old culture, particularly something called the telling, which I think Le Guin, I kind of sort of base this on Buddhism and Taoism, but really more than that, it's a process of telling stories and understanding the world through just recounting folk tales, basically, in a similar vein, perhaps, to the last book, to a certain extent. And so Sully meets people in this new town and tries to, get a handle of the culture she desperately wanted to learn about, although she has her own past baggage as well, because she views religion through the prism of it being something very oppressive, and that she has traumas in her past on Earth based thanks to the neo-Christian religious authority. So it's a little bit of a learning curve for her, but I guess not much of one, because it does feel like this religion, if you can even call it a religion, is so different that I felt like Le Guin could still, have her cake and eat it too if she wanted to, just, call Western religion something, just completely bad. But I feel like maybe I was getting a little too sensitive with that. But one thing I do feel like is part of this book is a simplistic world building, because when it comes to Akka, it seems like their whole history is we had this telling culture, and now we have this corporate culture, and that's it. And they're, a planet of people, and I think they are technically supposed to be human, or at least that's how I read them, but anyway, a planet of, sentient beings would have many more than just one culture. I mean, in the last book I read, there were several cultures, and we never really got out of Eastern Europe, so, so that's a little bit of a quibble I had. I also, I guess, quibbled a little or struggled a little in the middle, which was a lot more philosophical and less based on character interactions, as Sati was trying to learn and go through her thoughts about what the telling meant. But at the end of the day, it did return to character moments, and particularly she was able to have a relationship with a man who came, like in the Akan world, is on the completely opposite spectrum from her. And, they first meet in antagonistic circumstances because he views her as a threat. And then ultimately they're able to sort of understand each other. And I feel like that's really Le Guin's purpose, is to say, Sully has to challenge herself based on her past and also based on Akan's past to say that all of these different ideologies aren't good or evil on their face, but that, it's just based on what society does with them, and that there's plenty of people who, find meaning in ways that you don't find meaning. I think those are the sorts of things that come out in this book. And it definitely ends on a diplomatic note about basically a way to go forward and maybe reclaim some of what was lost is through diplomacy and not through some sort of revolution or violent revolution. So I like that as well. So I don't think I was as head over heels for this as I hoped I would be, although I certainly appreciate Le Guin's staying power. She's dealing with heady subjects, and a lot of the time I think she does a really great job with it, and I'm very intrigued to read her speculative social sciences and other Hainish novels like her much more famous The Left Hand of Darkness. I feel like I just can't go on without reading that one. Maybe it's the peer pressure, but that's the one everyone talks about. But anyway, I feel like I'm rambling off a cliff now, so I guess I'll put this down. And I will continue with what's next on the docket for me, or technically I've started reading this already, and that is The Vanishing Half by Bennett, which I am reading for the Booktube Prize, so I can't say any more about it anyway, other than perhaps a brief synopsis that it's about two sisters who are light black-skinned women who take very different paths. One stays within her community and one decides to pass as white. And this is taking place in middle century, 20th century America. And that is all I will say, because I am reading this for the Booktube Prize for the 2021 Finals in Fiction. The Booktube Prize was started a couple of years ago by Robert at Barter Hordes, wherein a bunch of judges from the Booktube and related communities gathered together for several months of the year to whittle down a long list of the best in fiction, nonfiction, and next year translated fiction that was published the year before, so 2020 for this one. So anyway, yeah, we are in the finals, which means there's a ballot of 6 books for fiction and nonfiction, and I am reading the fiction ballot. And I will be keeping mum as a judge until the official winners are announced in early October. But in the meantime, I will link to more Booktube Prize information down below. So that about covers it for me now. It's felt like a bit of a crazy week for me. In a way, kind of a nice week, because I got a very big break from work, because last Monday was Labor Day, and then Tuesday and Wednesday, in fact, were Rosh Hashanah, so I was celebrating at least part of the day, both of those days. But things are hectic as well. I think I've talked on this channel before that, my contract at work is ending, so I am sort of rushing through trying to tie up some loose ends. So it's perhaps not the best time to take a little time off of work, although it was well appreciated, and very much enjoyed Rosh Hashanah services and got to participate in person, and that was very nice. And very safe. It's the first time I had to, present my vaccination card to gain entrance into a building. So there's that. And meanwhile, Yom Kippur is coming up on Thursday, so the cycle continues, and I'll be checking back in. In fact, you will see me here next on this channel sometime later this week for my monthly Author's Answer video, so stay tuned. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Shana Tova to everyone celebrating the New Year, and I'll see you next time.